Welcome to Carbon Conversations, a podcast by Biochar Life, where we explore the cutting edge of environmental solutions. From biochar to smart agriculture to the climate tech revolution, we sit down with experts and business leaders at the forefront of change. This is your host, Matt Rickard. Hey Dominic, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Hi Matt, I'm doing fine. And you? All good?
I'm very well, thanks.
I'd love to be in the podcast with you. I listened to all of your episodes. I'm reading your blogs, and it was like one of my bucket list points to be in the podcast with
Awesome.
Matt from Biochar.
Well, it's taken us a while, but thanks for the shout out. That's probably the best beginning I've had to a podcast. And for the audience, that was not scripted. I wasn't asking for the compliment, but I very much appreciate it. So yeah, it's good to see you. We know each other well. We were last, I think, together in London a couple of months ago doing an event where we talked about some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. But yeah, maybe the best starting point, just for our audience, because obviously they don't know you. Just give us a bit of, the elevator pitch on yourself, your background, and how you got involved with Carbon Standards International in the biochar space.
Yeah, I'd love to. So my name is Dominic. I was born and still live in Switzerland. It's a beautiful part in the middle of Europe. I'm currently surrounded by mountains. It's a really nice tiny village where I live. I have a background in environmental engineering. I studied at a local university in Zurich, and I started my career after the studies as a sustainability consultant. And my first topics were more like e-waste or plastic recycling. And then I had the luck that kind of the managing director of this sustainability consultancy was more into waste to energy pyrolysis biochar. And then, one came to the other. And after like half a year, I was doing more pyrolysis projects, biochar, business case development for like big food and beverage companies. And I'm so kind lost my heart to biochar. And after like 3 years, I needed a change. I saw this great opportunity at Carbon Standards International to become the new product manager for their Global Artisan C-Sink Standard. And so roughly 14 months ago, I changed jobs, and I'm still very lucky where I am and the opportunity to speak with so amazing people all the time.
Cool. Well, we certainly enjoy working with you, and yeah, we have a strong partnership with CSI, with Carbon Standards International, which goes back a number of years now. Obviously, we helped with the development of the standard, which we'll talk about. Maybe you could do a bit of an explanation on CSI. Who is CSI for the audience who don't know CSI, and maybe what sets CSI apart in terms of from other organizations in terms of setting standards in the carbon removal space.
Yeah. So Carbon Standards International was officially launched or established roughly 3 years ago in 2021. It was kind of a joint venture, when we can call it so, from the Ithaca Institute, which is our leading scientific when it comes to standards. They were like the inventor of the European Biochar certificate, one of the leading standard when it comes to quality of the biochar, and kind of set the ground for biochar market in Europe like 12 years ago. A joint or a holding company called EasyCert Group with a background in certification schemes, organic certification, group certification. And I realized that having kind of a standard setting company or division within the voluntary carbon market would really fit well in what they are aiming for, to increase kind of the livelihood for everyone when it comes to maybe organic certification of food, but also when it comes to carbon credit and helping the climate get restored.
And I think I'm right in saying really, the foundations of CSI are very scientific in terms of the people behind it, in terms of the approach, in terms of looking at the different methodologies, right? I mean, you have a real scientific foundation within the organization and within the founders of the organization.
Yes, yes. I mean, when someone is looking at one of our standards, they usually are quite puzzled, because I think that's like one of the difference to others. Our standards are more like a PhD document than like this classic, simply you have to do this, this, and that. Because for us, it's really important that people understand why we're doing such things. Why, for example, the specific requirement or aspect that we have like a real focus on, and others why, for example, we don't include other aspects in our way of thinking about the carbon removal market, so that everyone understands and can challenge based on scientific proof. Yeah, it makes sense in this context. And we are always open to be challenged, and we get challenged quite a lot. One of the kind of fun part when you're working like for a standard developer, standard owner, that if you come up with something new, you get challenged because people have difficulties at the beginning to understand what you're aiming for and what's the big vision behind it.
Indeed. And smallholder farmers, there's no getting away from them. They are our life every day. I know they're a big part of what you do. They're really central to, not everything CSI does, but certainly, many of the approaches. How does, in your view, working with smallholder farmers in the global south, impact carbon removal efforts? How important is it? And leading on from that, what are the kind of the opportunities, but also the challenges, more so in terms of really leveraging that huge resource that we understand to be smallholder farmers?
I mean, I love working with people, and especially smallholder farmers. It's always something different. It's always another opportunity, and in the end, they create the planet a little bit. They have this huge amount of biomass available. They are living often together with nature, kind of. They have like a perfect sense of circular economy. And there's just so many of them around that you have a huge leverage when you can tackle this group of people and bring them to the next level. Because often carbon credits are just a way to finance your project, to bring knowledge and new aspects into their life and help them getting a better life where they can even thrive more than before. But it's also challenging because changing habits of ourselves, I mean, you know it by every day. If you kind of want to do more sports or having like cooking more for yourself, it's pretty challenging to change your habits. And so it's for smallholder farmers getting away from like old tradition of burning down the fields after the harvest, and instead also harvesting these crop residues, dry it, turn it into biochar, and use it as a fertilizer product when mixed with compost or manure. And so you need this incentive. Often it's money, you can be honest about it. So they could also realize, okay, if I change, I will get paid, but I always see in the next year or 2 years the additional benefits when I applied biochar, increasing yields, less water scarcity or problems in a region. And so it's this total kind of wholesome project, or the look that you can have. How can you help and support such smallholder farmers in their everyday life? And that's what I really like about Global Artisan C-Sink. Really like this combination of working with farmers, tackling kind of an everyday life problem for them, increasing yield, and make them a little bit more independent from mineral fertilizer or kind of climate change, so they can have better yields.
Indeed, going back to your point, obviously I'm here in northern Thailand. We see, that burning happening every year. I mean, at the moment we're going through floods for other reasons, but it happens around February. We see it every year. So for me, even before you've looked at carbon removal, just that mitigation of burning is such a massive impact environmentally, air pollution wise, health wise, so many reasons. So you started to touch there on the Global Artisan C-Sink Standard. Obviously, I understand it, but I for the sake of the audience who maybe don't, this is really what you live and breathe in your role. The Global Artisan C-Sink Standard, which CSI oversee. Can you explain for the audience what the standard is, how it was developed, and the importance of ensuring the quality of carbon removal projects within that standard?
Yeah, I'd love to. The exact story, how it was invented, was way before my time when I started at Carbon Standards. And I was told that it basically was Biochar Life and another company called Plambu. They reached out to Hans-Peter Schmidt, like they had at ITAC Institute, with the brave idea, kind of how can we incorporate or bring smallholder farmers into the game when it comes to climate change and fight against climate change, get use of their abundance of biomass, having a local circular economy directly on the field, using the crop residues, turning into biochar by themselves, reduce logistics and transportation because you don't have to bring that biomass to a certain place, and can really bring something into their life. And I think it was a really brave idea to have. And with the background of this organic group certification, the idea came up, how can we group those farmers into a network that has like a project manager, a supervisor on top of it, so that costs for certification, annual inspections, documents to write, tracking apps and so on, how can we reduce these costs for a single farmer? Because a smallholder farmer has maybe a hectare. They maybe produce some 100 kgs of biochar per year. So to be able to afford the certification, to get credits into a registry that are verified, it's quite costly and could never be kind of feasible with only some 100 kgs of biochar produced. So this network idea came up where we have networks of farmers. They are grouped together. There's a supervisor, a C-Sink manager that observes them with stuff. They do training, because in the Global Artisan C-Sink, it's about simple technologies, simple kiln designs, like a Contiki soil pit, because they're like cheap and easy to build. So it's perfectly for smallholder farmers, but they need to be trained how to use that. They need to be supervised and inspected internally to keep track that they are still doing it as they were taught during a training, that all the data that is needed for the verification of credits by a third party in the end in the registry can happen, and so on. And that's like one of the beautiful aspects of these standards, because you have so many stakeholders involved which directly work together to become successful. And it's also quite scalable, because if you have done your learnings with some dozens, 100 of farmers, if you're able, you can expand and you can copy paste the system quite easily and adapt it to the local conditions, maybe in another country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we've certainly, from a scalability point of view, it's incredibly scalable, and we've certainly seen that this year, just in how we've been able to roll out, to new farmers. There is a major headcount need in terms of verification and everything else, which means a big team. We're up to a kind of 100 this year, just managing process around tracking data and grabbing images and stuff. But, I think also the social impact element of the standard is something that we see as important as well. All the co-benefits around creating new jobs in these communities. So it's a great standard, and probably a good segue into we were super excited when you guys started speaking with ICROA, which would have been some time ago now. I don't know when the initial consultation started, but these things take a while, as they should, for good reason. And, the amount of information we have had to provide and other producers and the new procedures and processes and additional data. I hate acronyms because we have so many in this industry. So maybe a good starting point. Sorry to put you on the spot because I should have had it in front of me. But ICROA, you can read it off the page. But talk to us a bit about ICROA, who they are, what the endorsement really means, in terms of CSI's ICROA endorsement, and for organizations like ourselves who can now go to market and say, we have ICROA endorsed credits based on certain conditions. So talk us through a bit of that and what it really means for CSI and the space.
Yep. So ICROA, I have to look it up every time because I forget it all the time. ICROA is the International Carbon Reduction and Offset Alliance.
Okay.
So in the voluntary carbon market, as it often also refers to kind of a little bit the Wild West, because there are no legal boundaries or laws, regulations around in this voluntary carbon market, because it's something between private companies in that sense. But people are looking for guidance and insurance to be more trustworthy and this transparency. So on the one hand, you have standard developers registry like Carbon Standards International that give some boundaries, like how to run a project. And you have companies or associations, alliances like ICROA, similar to Corsia when it comes to aircrafts, airplanes, and their offset market, or a new one would be ICVCM, the International Council for Voluntary Carbon Market, and they try to set rules for standards and registry to have like a common ground. What we try with our standards for projects, they are trying to be more transparent and bringing trust into this voluntary carbon market for registry and standard developers. So really short, as a project needs to go through a verification, a certification with specific requirements, we had to go as well through it. And for us, it was quite challenging because in comparison to our competitors like Vera, we are pretty small as a company. So resources and especially time is quite limited for us. And so it took us a long way because we also have like a different thinking how we want to set up these project schemes. We have the difference between artisan, where you have a project, but when we go on our industrial side of biochar production and carbon credit certification, it's completely different because there we have like a stakeholder individual aspect and scheme. So it was a little bit challenging to come up with how can we put the requirements they gave us and our way of thinking and doing business together to bring it to the next level and help our kind of customers like Biochar Life that are using our standards to get credits to get this ICROA endorsement. So for us, it was obvious that for people like you and your company, it's important to have it because more and more buyers are requesting it, that the standard has ICROA and fulfills certain requirements when it comes to transparency and openness. And during this process, we had to develop new documents and procedures. For example, a project design document, which is basically a project description, a little bit in more detail, that guides a third party, an outside person in the registry, a little bit through this project, that he or she can read what are you doing, in which country, how are you tracking certain data, who is involved, what are you doing, kind of. It needs to be validated and verified by a third party. So that's something we already know, because also before we had on-site inspections and certification done by a third party. But once a year, they come to you and check you out. if you fulfill the requirements. And now we had to make it a little bit more official, transparent, so that everyone can see what are you fulfilling, what are non-compliances that you might have on the ground, so that if a person goes on our registry that is public available, he can click on a credit, and then he sees like all the data that is related to this project. What it's about, how was the last inspection, what are non-compliances, what is the data that led to this specific credit, so that everyone can kind of understand, okay, and challenge a little bit, is this credit legitimate or is it not? And so ICOA helped us, or kind of pushed us, to increase this transparency, even though we had it before to a certain extent, and pushed us to think about, okay, how can we even better getting this trade-off balance between the different stakeholders involved in this voluntary carbon market, where we have like buyers requesting something, we have agencies like ICOA that want to set boundaries and rules to be aligned in this entire market, project developers that have specific requirements and needs. How can we bring it all together to make everyone happy? It will not always work, but ICOA was for sure a big milestone for us. And we're really happy that we got recently, I think like 2 months ago, their conditional endorsement for our registry. And we're looking forward to see like a lot of PDDs now and more documents in the registry so that everyone can look what amazing work you are doing and others.
Cool. Well, yeah, look, congratulations. It's good news. We were already creating project design documents, PDDs, but I think the difference is having a formal structure around this is good. Yeah, not just for us, but across the space for buyers to have consistency in format, layout, type of data. So yeah, it's more work, but it's work for a good reason. So congratulations again. It's important, I think, to keep pushing ahead in this way. So maybe as a good segue to that, and somewhat of a closing question, kind of looking forward, as things develop, I mean, actually this for us and for you, I mean, we're constantly looking to, innovate in terms of how we, manage our process. I mean, we've, even if I look in the last 18 months, I mean, now we're, taking moisture readings, heat readings, we're taking, 2 photos per burn. We've got EC readings. So there's a lot already, and there's always going to be more coming in terms of data and information for buyers to provide more, visibility, more transparency, and more trust around the process. What do you see as the future? Anything coming down the track? And how do you see CSI evolving, I suppose, as an organization over the coming years?
I think one of the main aspects that we have, or like to-dos for like next year or the year after, is to raise more awareness, because we are still unknown kind of in comparison to Vera or Gold Standard, and we want to change that, because it's important that people understand who we are, what we are doing, that they understand what a Global Artisan C-Sink Standard is for and what's the reason behind it. So to also help you when you have conversation with buyers, so that they already know, Carbon Standards, I already heard of them, they're doing a great job, and you're taking one of their standards, nice, we love to work with you. That's kind of our goal. When it comes a little bit to marketing, raising awareness, and to put this kind of how to involve smallholder farmers in this entire process, or this climate change discussion and topic. And the rest, I would say we have some topics in mind that we want to increase or adapt, improve, because a standard is never done. It's never finished. It's just the status quo that you think at this time of the moment. It serves the purpose that we have as a standard developer. It serves the purpose that scientific research can bring into this discussion, like what's the newest knowledge. And what are from the carbon market buyer side requirements and needs, what they want to have, and as well from your point as a project developers, because you have to find this trade-off, this balance between all of these needs to be able to produce a standard or publish a standard that reflects all of this, but still is feasible and practical in the real life, because nothing is more worse than having the well thought through detailed standard, but if no one can apply to it or use it, then it's kind of useless. So it's really, that's like one of our aspects or key separation points. We want to write standards that are feasible in practice, even though we will challenge with every new update some of the status quo and drive you a little bit more into one direction. And often, I know we will have for sure this conversation again, like a little bit, why do we have to do that? It's not realistic, but it's also our job as a standard developer, like to push the market and drive it a little bit.
Cool.
So it will be definitely not boring in the next year. iCroa will still influence us. We still need to make sure that everyone fulfills those requirements, that we have the documentation, adapt our procedures to help you, that you not struggle with paperwork in that sense, so that you can more focus on actually driving, developing your projects.
Cool. Yeah, I think your comment before sums a lot of that up. That is, a standard is never done. It's not a static thing, right? It's just going to continue evolving. And going back to my comments at the beginning about, being kind of science being the foundation, that is also why, because you're constantly testing and readjusting and changing based on what can get better and better. So yeah, it's good to hear. Good to hear there's going to be more to do.
Yeah. Trust me. We have so much in mind that we want to do. And now that we have iCroa, it gives us also a little bit more time and resources to think on the next steps and how can we kind of help you to bring the data and topics needed for the conversation in the voluntary carbon market, that in the end smallholder farmers can benefit, that they're not left out in this entire market because they play a vital role in our everyday life, especially in the global south.
I couldn't agree more, and maybe that's a great place to kind of end the discussion. Look, I really appreciate you joining. I know that people are going to have more questions, so and we can also, I think we should do these more regularly and even on certain topics around the standard, actually. But in terms of people finding out more, wanting to get in touch, wanting to learn about the standard, ask you questions, where can they find out? I'll leave notes for anyone listening or watching in the speaker notes below, but just want to leave, the best place for people to get in touch and learn more.
Yeah, in the end, you can just go online on our website, carbonstandards.com, and there you find a section about standards. You can check out the Global Artisan C-Sink, and below on the page you will find me and my colleague Luki with our email addresses, and you are always free to just write an email, ask us your questions, and we try our best to give you an answer that helps you in most of the time.
Cool. All right. Well, I will leave those links in the speaker notes, Dominic. Again, thanks for joining. I appreciate it. We know each other. We'll be catching up again, I'm sure, in the coming days on other stuff. So, all the best.
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for having me. It was a pleasure to be here. And I'm looking for your next podcasts with the next topics and the fruitful conversation that we will have in the future.
Cheers. You're too nice. Thanks a lot.